Every summer, my small town comes alive with the lights of the local festival, where people from all around gather to have fun and enjoy delicious snacks. I have always loved this lively atmosphere, the excitement spreading from the games to the art performances. However, during one particular festival season, I would discover that not everything is as bright as it seems. That summer when I was 12, the festival had a theme of nightmare, featuring spooky games and a standout haunted house. The atmosphere of this festival was strange, but I couldn't resist the curiosity. I invited my best friend, Tom, to join me. We eagerly walked to the festival, the fresh air and laughter echoing all around us. Upon arrival, we quickly purchased our entrance tickets and immersed ourselves in the crowd. The fun games, lively sounds, and delicious aroma of popcorn made me forget all my worries. However, a sense of unease lingered in my heart as I noticed the bizarre images hanging around the game booths. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. We began to try our luck at the games, and as the laughter echoed around us, I felt more at ease. However, as the sky darkened, I noticed a heavy black curtain descending over the festival. The flickering lights began to dim, and the atmosphere grew thick and oppressive. After playing a few games, we decided to try the haunted house. "I've heard there are really strange things inside," Tom said, a delighted smile on his face. I felt a rush of excitement and couldn't wait any longer. We stepped inside, and the door of the house slammed shut behind us, leaving us in darkness. Inside, everything was chaotic and disordered. Laughter, screams, and strange sounds blended together. I felt as if I had wandered into a never-ending dream. But as we moved deeper inside, I sensed something else. It felt as though someone was watching us. "Do you hear the whispers?" I asked Tom, but he just shook his head. It might just be an echo, but I couldn't shake off this strange feeling. I turned around and saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. When I looked again, the figure vanished like smoke. "Come on!" I shouted. But as we moved faster, I felt a chilling breeze sweep through, making the hairs on my neck stand up. Tom and I searched for an exit, but it seemed like everything was changing. The rooms appeared to be shifting, and we were trapped in a maze of darkness. As we entered another room, I saw a large mirror. The dim light reflected our images, but the strange thing was that in the mirror, I saw a figure standing behind me. My heart raced, and I turned around, but there was no one there.
"Is something wrong?"
Tom asked, but I could only shake my head, unsure of what to say. Leaving that room, we desperately searched for an exit, but the eerie laughter echoed around us, heightening our anxiety. Suddenly, I heard a voice ring out.
"Run, run."
A chill enveloped me, and I couldn't pinpoint where the sound was coming from. "We have to go," I shouted, but at that moment, everything had descended into chaos. We felt as if someone was watching us from behind. When I turned to look, I saw a figure emerge, grinning eerily. Without thinking, we bolted out of the haunted house. As we stepped out into the light, I glanced back and saw the figure standing at the door, its eyes glowing intensely. Tom and I breathed a sigh of relief, but the atmosphere was still heavy. "Let's go," I said, and we ran away from the haunted house. But when we returned to the fairgrounds, everything seemed to have changed. The bright, shining lights now appeared as if they were eyes watching us. I couldn't believe my eyes as I saw festival-goers transformed into ghostly figures gliding through the air.
"What is happening?"
Tom asked, his expression one of panic. We ran back to the exit, but it felt like everything was blocked. The pathways were locked, and I felt as if we were trapped in a nightmare. Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind us.
Run, run.
As we turned to see a group of ghosts advancing towards us, I felt a surge of terror. "Come on, let's go," I shouted, pulling Tom along. We had no idea where to run, just desperately trying to escape the vague threat looming behind us. The laughter and festivities of the fair seemed to fade into a haunting silence, replaced by the eerie whispers of the apparitions. Eventually, we found a small door in a dark corner. I opened it and we burst outside. At that moment, the atmosphere around us felt lighter, but there was still an unsettling sensation lingering in the air. We returned to the fair, but the joyful vibe had completely vanished. The bright lights now felt dim, and the laughter that once filled the air was replaced by an unsettling silence, making us realize that we had crossed into something far more sinister than we had ever imagined. I looked around and could no longer see the familiar faces of friends, only the wandering shadows of ghosts. I realized that there are things in life that cannot be explained and secrets that we should never explore. We ran toward the light of the crowd, and as we exited the gate, I glanced back one last time to see that figure, grinning malevolently. From that point on, I never returned to that festival again. The memories of that terrifying night changed me forever. I learned that not everything that glitters is gold, and sometimes curiosity can lead to frightening outcomes. That summer, I decided to take a part-time job at the local carnival, a well-known event in the small town where I lived. For many people, this carnival was just an occasion to have fun and enjoy junk food. But for me, it was an opportunity to earn some extra pocket money. This year's carnival had a rather bizarre theme: horror games, featuring many exciting games and thrilling attractions. I was assigned to work at the haunted house, a large, dark structure with moss-coated walls and dim lighting. It was said that this house once belonged to a wealthy family, but it was later abandoned due to a dark legend. Locals claimed that the spirits of that family still wandered within the house, searching for those who dared to trespass on their territory. On my first night of work, the atmosphere was truly strange. I stood at the entrance of the house, welcoming guests with a smile on my face, but inside I felt an unsettling sense of anxiety. Everyone was laughing and joking, but I sensed that something was off. As I observed the visitors, I noticed that a few had gone in, but had not come out. At first I thought I was imagining things, but that feeling continued to cling to me. One evening, while I was on duty, a beautiful girl walked in, her eyes sparkling under the flickering lights. Her name was Alice, and we started chatting. She was very enthusiastic and seemed completely unafraid. I found myself interested in her, but part of me felt anxious as I watched her gaze sweep over the dark walls of the house. She said she wanted to explore, and all I could do was nod, not wanting to hinder her curiosity. As I watched the visitors come in and out, the numbers just didn't add up. Each time a group entered, I noticed there were fewer people when they came out. I decided to investigate a bit, and when I stepped inside, I heard whispers, as if someone was having a conversation. I called out Lily's name, but there was no response. The thrill of anxiety rose as I realized that I might have lost track of her. I continued searching, and when I reached a dark room, I felt a chill run down my spine. From a shadowy corner, there was a glimmer of light, and I followed it. It was an old mirror, but unlike any mirror I had ever seen. The glass reflected my image, but in it, I saw a figure standing behind me. Terrified, I turned around, but there was no one there. Back outside, I saw another group of guests entering the house, but once again, the numbers didn't add up. I noticed several people going in, but I didn't see them coming out. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach, and I decided to check again. This time, I couldn't find any sign of Lily at all. After a while, an elderly man stepped into the haunted house. He appeared strange, with an unsettling look that I couldn't quite explain. He glanced around as if searching for something. I started to feel anxious and uncomfortable, but I couldn't leave my post. As he moved closer, I heard a whisper from behind me.
Come back.
A soft but clear voice echoed. I couldn't pinpoint the source of the sound, but I felt as if someone was watching me from behind. Determined not to let myself panic, I moved forward to check my surroundings. However, as I entered another room, I felt the presence of a dark figure. I couldn't see it clearly, but I knew it was there. I called out loudly, but only received an echo in return. In a moment of panic, I decided to run outside to search for Lily. But when I turned back, the door slammed shut. I tried to open it, but it was locked tight. I had no idea who had done this, but a wave of fear washed over me. Everything turned chaotic as I heard a giggle echoing from deep within the house. I rushed into another room and was immediately slammed against a cold wall. Something damp touched my face, and I turned around with a panicked gaze. It was a figure with glowing, bright eyes staring back at me. My girl, it mumbled, and I felt myself being engulfed in darkness. The world around me began to spin, and I couldn't comprehend what was happening. I tried to find a way out, but every time I attempted to open a door, something blocked my path. The laughter echoed again, and a whispering voice said,
Don't leave.
I felt panic rising within me, but a part of me still refused to give up. I began to shout Lily's name, hoping she would hear me. Finally, I decided to confront my fears. I slammed my fist against the door, and miraculously, it swung open. I bolted outside, racing straight toward the exit. As I stepped into the light, I saw Lily standing there, a bewildered look on her face.
I've been looking for you,
she said, and I felt a rush of fresh air flooding over me. But everything was not as it seemed. When I turned back to look at the haunted house, I saw that dark figure standing in the window, its bright, furious eyes locked onto mine. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The girl I had encountered in the haunted house, I now realized, was not an ordinary person. "Run!" I shouted to Lily, and we sprinted toward the festival. As we got closer to the entrance, the bright lights of the carnival made me feel safer. Finally, when I looked back, I saw that the dark figure had vanished. That night left an unforgettable memory in me. From then on, I never returned to that festival again, knowing that some secrets were meant to remain undiscovered. Festivals are usually a time of joy, but for me, it became an unforgettable memory. When I was around 12 years old, my small town hosted a vibrant summer festival where people gathered to enjoy food, play games, and soak in the lively atmosphere. However, deep down, I always felt a sense of unease whenever I got close to the festival. That year, the festival took place at the end of August, and the excitement in the air seemed to uplift everyone around me. My friends, including Alice, who I was very close to, decided that we would go to the festival together. Although I felt a bit anxious, I couldn't turn down their invitation. As we arrived at the festival, the sight was magnificent. Bright lights, lively music echoing everywhere. We strolled through the stalls, trying delicious street food like cotton candy and fried potatoes. But as soon as we approached the haunted house, a strange feeling washed over me. The house was decorated with eerie symbols, and strange sounds resonated from inside, as if calling out to the brave to step inside.
Should we go in?
Alice asked, her eyes filled with curiosity. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. As we stepped inside, the air instantly became cold. The laughter and screams from outside faded away. Instead, we could only hear heavy breathing and faint whispers. Inside, everything was dark and suffocating. We moved through rooms adorned with bizarre images and distorted mirrors. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through, sending chills down my spine. "Is anyone here?" I called out, but there was no response. As we continued deeper into the house, I noticed that Alice had disappeared. "Alice," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. Confusion set in, and fear began to rise. Just as I turned around, I saw a figure standing in the dark corner, and I immediately felt a chill run down my spine. The figure approached, and I recognized it as an elderly woman with a mysterious expression.
"You shouldn't be here."
She said in a gentle yet authoritative tone. I wanted to ask her about Alice, but a strange feeling held me back from speaking. Inside was a dark room filled with large mirrors reflecting distorted images of myself. The cold atmosphere sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, a whisper echoed in my ear.
"She's here."
I turned around, but there was no one in sight. Time passed, and I felt as if I were trapped in a nightmare. Every time I tried to find an exit, the walls seemed to shift, making it impossible to escape. I ran in desperation, but all I could see were the strange images reflected in the mirrors, as if they were watching me. Finally, I found another exit. As I stepped out, I saw the woman standing there, staring at me.
"Have you found her?"
She asked, and I felt a chilling sensation as I realized she knew more than I thought. "No, I haven't seen Alice," I replied, my voice trembling. She chuckled softly.
"She will never leave here. She is a part of this place."
I felt a chill run down my spine. "You can't keep her," I yelled and bolted out of the haunted house. When I got outside, everything had changed. The festival lights were off, and no one was there. A chilling sensation enveloped me, and I felt as if something was lurking. I quickly ran toward the exit gates, but no one stopped me. I just wanted to escape this place. As I reached the exit gate, a strong gust of wind blew through, and I turned back to look. The woman was still standing there, her gaze seemingly tracking my every step.
"Remember, she will always be here."
She whispered. I didn't want to look back anymore, so I hurriedly stepped out of the festival, my heart filled with confusion. In the following days, I couldn't sleep. The images of a haunted house and that woman haunted me. I decided to seek information about the festival and the haunted house. As I researched, I discovered that many strange events had occurred around the festival in previous years, and there were rumors that the haunted house had once been a refuge for unexplainable entities. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and decided to return to the festival, but this time I didn't go alone. I invited a group of friends to join me and prepared for the strange things that might happen. When we arrived, the festive atmosphere returned, but the feeling of anxiety still loomed over me. We decided to enter the haunted house once again. This time, I didn't feel alone. My friends joined me as we stepped inside. As we moved through the rooms, I felt as if something was watching us. "Is anyone here?" one of my group called out, but there was no response. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through, and we heard laughter echoing from the walls. "We shouldn't be here," I shouted, but my friends continued to venture deeper into the house. When we reached the last room, I saw a painting of a boy, but his eyes looked as if he was pleading for help. "Get out! Don't stay here," I shouted, but no one listened. We started to panic and ran to find an exit. When we finally found a door, I felt a rush of cold air hit us. We opened the door and saw blinding lights, but as we stepped out, the joyful atmosphere had vanished. Everyone around us looked at us with strange expressions. "What happened?" someone asked, but I couldn't answer. We quickly left the festival, but the haunting images lingered in my mind. Every time a festival was held, I would remember the haunted house and the mysterious things hidden within it. I knew there were things in the darkness that couldn't be explained, and perhaps one day, those secrets would come back to find me. Let me tell you about a strange experience I had as a child, an event I will never forget. It was on a summer evening when I was about 12 years old, during the summer festival in my small town. The lively atmosphere, with bright lights, cheerful sounds, and the aroma of fast food, always drew me in. I had gone with my best friend, Mia. We lived close to each other, so it was just a short walk to the fair. That day, the festival was crowded, and we spent hours playing games and enjoying funnel cakes and cotton candy. But as night fell, that cheerful atmosphere was overshadowed by something strange. As we were playing a ball-tossing game, I suddenly received a message from an unknown number. The first message simply read, "Hey, you look really pretty." I was confused and looked at the number. No one in my contacts had that number. I asked Mia if she knew who it might be, but she shook her head. I felt a little anxious. As we continued playing, more messages popped up. "I'm nearby. Do you want to meet me?" A shiver ran down my spine. It could just be a prank, but the feeling was unsettling. I decided not to reply, thinking that if someone wanted to talk, they could just stop messaging. Mia felt uneasy and suggested that we should leave the area, but I didn't want to make her more worried. We continued wandering around the festival, but the feeling of anxiety clung to me. Each time I looked at my phone, there was another message. "Come back here, I'm very close." I didn't want to stay there any longer. Finally, as the night deepened and we decided to head home, I saw him. A figure standing among the crowd, tall and thin, with a face that was hard to discern. As Mia and I left the festival, I felt as though someone was watching us. I told Mia, and we quickened our pace. It was dark, and as we walked home, the sounds around us faded into silence. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind us. My heart raced, and I turned to see the man still standing in the distance, staring at us. I felt like there was no way out, and my mind began to spiral into panic. "Mia, we have to go faster," I whispered, and we began to run, but there was nowhere to escape. It felt like the man was chasing us, getting closer and closer. We dashed into a dark alley, searching for any place to hide. As we entered the alley, I heard the footsteps getting closer.
Don't run. I just want to talk.
A voice called out. I froze in fear. "We're not your friends," I yelled. But I couldn't see the man's face, only his silhouette moving closer. Mia pulled my hand, and we dashed out of the alley. We reached a main street, illuminated by bright lights. But that feeling of safety lasted only a moment. The man appeared, lurking at the end of the road. "I know you're here," he yelled, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. We started looking for a safer place, and eventually, we found a cafe that was open late. As we stepped inside, I felt as though we had escaped, We sat down and ordered drinks, still shaken from our experience. But that sense of peace didn't last long. As we sat in the cafe, I spotted the man standing outside, staring through the window. He didn't leave. He just stood there, his eyes unblinking, fixed on me. I saw Mia start to tremble, and the fear within me surged again. "We have to call the police," I said, but when I pulled out my phone, there was no signal. A sense of despair engulfed me. He moved closer, and we knew there was no time left to escape.
He's going to come in here.
Mia shouted, and we stood up, running toward the door. But just as we got close, the man was standing in the way. "I just want to talk." He laughed, but his smile was anything but friendly. We turned and bolted out of the cafe. "Run!" I shouted, and we sprinted toward the main road. The sound of his footsteps echoed behind us. He was chasing after us. We dashed through the streets, but we couldn't find anywhere safe. Finally, as we reached a crowded residential area, I spotted the flashing lights of a police car in the distance. "We have to get there," I said, and we kept running. As we approached, I waved my arms and shouted, "Help us!" The officers spotted us and quickly rushed over. "What's going on?" they asked, and I pointed to the man standing in the distance. "He's been following us," I said, my breath still panting. They turned to look and ordered the man to stop. He seemed surprised but did not run away. Instead, he stood there, a smile on his face. Finally, the police arrested him. They asked us about the incident, and I recounted everything. As we returned home, the feeling of safety began to return, but the memory of that night would haunt me forever. What happened afterward was an explanation of the events that had unfolded. The man was charged with harassment and stalking. The festival we once loved had turned into a terrifying memory. I decided never to attend the festival again. The memory of that man and his frightening gaze would forever be etched in my mind. When I was a child, I used to be very fond of the lively atmosphere of festivals. The colorful lights, the cheerful music, and the exciting games always made me feel excited and eager. However, there is a terrifying memory that forever changed that love. This story begins on a summer evening, when I was about 12 years old. My small town held a festival at the end of July, and that lively atmosphere attracted people from all around. I, along with my close friends, Max and Sarah, had planned to attend the festival. When we arrived, the atmosphere was vibrant with laughter and the aroma of snacks wafting everywhere. "Let's try the ring toss first," Max suggested, his face beaming with excitement. "And we have to get cotton candy too," Sarah added, her eyes sparkling as she spotted the booth. After having fun for a while, we spent time at various games, from ring toss to shooting booths. The feeling of triumph whenever we won a prize was exhilarating, but as the sky began to darken, I sensed that something was off. As I strolled around the festival, I suddenly spotted a haunted house tucked away in a corner of the grounds. The house looked peculiar, with its black painted walls, a tightly shut door, and strange noises emanating from within. "Should we give it a try?" Sarah asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I'm not sure. It looks kind of strange," I replied, feeling a wave of anxiety rising within me. "Come on, it's just a game." Max laughed as he pulled me toward the door. Reluctantly, I agreed to step inside, even though a part of me was filled with unease. As we entered, a chilling atmosphere enveloped us immediately. The sounds from outside seemed to vanish, leaving only the heavy breaths and strange whispers echoing from the darkened rooms. Each of our footsteps echoed in the silence, and the distorted mirrors reflected our images in unsettling ways, making me feel as though someone was watching us. "Is anyone here?" I called out, but there was no response. Suddenly, a laughter echoed from somewhere within the house. My heart raced, and I turned to look for Max and Sarah. But as I turned around, I saw a figure standing in the doorway. Frail old woman with a chilling gaze. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her tone serious, sending a wave of unease through me. "We're just exploring," I protested, but she didn't relent. She pointed toward a dark room. "She won't come back," she continued, making me feel as if I were trapped in a nightmare. The air grew heavy around us, and I could sense the darkness creeping in, suffocating my courage. As I turned around, I heard my name being called. Max and Sarah were rushing toward me. "Run!" Sarah shouted, and without needing to ask why, I sprinted after them out of the haunted house. "We have to hurry," I said, feeling as though someone was trailing behind us. We dashed outside, feeling as if we had just escaped a nightmare. But when I glanced back, I saw the woman still standing in the doorway, smiling enigmatically. After leaving the festival, we sat down together to share what had happened. "We shouldn't go back to that house again," I advised. They agreed, and we decided to head home. In the days that followed, the memory of the festival and the haunted house lingered in my mind. The fear I felt kept me from returning to the festival the next year. A year later, the festival took place again. Despite my anxiety, curiosity compelled me to join Max and Sarah. Upon arriving, the festive atmosphere was still present, but the sense of apprehension washed over me once more. "Come on, it'll be fun," Max urged, a grin on his face. "I really don't want to. Remember last time?" I protested, feeling the old fears creeping back. But they were persistent, and eventually I relented. As we stepped inside, I immediately felt the change. The air was heavier, and the whispers echoed eerily around us. I turned back and saw that woman again, moving deeper into the shadows of the house. "Run!" I shouted, but Max and Sarah were captivated by the mysteries of the house. It felt as though I was trapped in a nightmare with no escape. Finally, I made the decision to flee. I dashed out of the haunted house, not caring whether Max and Sarah followed me. Once outside, I looked back, but saw only the cold, dark silhouette of the house. As I tried to find my way home, the images of the haunted house haunted me. I couldn't shake off the memories of what had happened, and the fear lingered on. Every summer, when the festival was held, I would think back to that night. My love for the festival had changed forever, and perhaps that was the most regrettable part. Because I knew there were secrets hidden in the darkness of forgotten places, and one day they might return to find me. John was a dedicated park ranger with years of experience protecting the wild beauty of Sequoia National Forest. Every morning, he would ride his bike along the tree-shaded trails, breathing in the fresh air and feeling the pulse of the forest. To John, this job was not just a duty, it was his passion, the place where he found peace amidst the chaos of life. One morning, while checking the surrounding areas, a sudden foul stench hit John's nose. He stopped, furrowed his brow, and tried to pinpoint its source. This area was usually quiet and filled with the pleasant aroma of trees and plants. But today, something was different. The smell lingered in the air, bringing a sense of discomfort and unease. Sensing that something was wrong, John decided to follow the direction from which the odor came. After a while, he stopped at a clearing between the ancient trees. The sight before him left him speechless. A woman's hand, badly injured, stood out amidst torn fabric. Her face bore an expression of utter terror, her eyes wide open as if pleading for help. John swallowed hard, his heart racing like never before. He tried to step back, not wanting to keep his eyes on the horrific scene, but his legs felt frozen in place. Suddenly, in the stillness of the forest, a low sound echoed, a deep growl from within the darkness, signaling the presence of some mysterious creature nearby. A chill ran down John's spine, jolting him back to reality as a wave of fear crashed over him. Unable to stay any longer, he turned and sprinted towards his bike parked by the roadside. Every footstep echoed on the damp ground, in sync with the pounding of his heart. Branches snagged at him, but the panic and fear gave him strength. Run, run, and just keep running. When he reached his bike, John frantically dialed the rescue team, his voice shaky and stammering, unable to stop trembling. For the first time in his career, he felt powerless and confused. He knew something was terribly wrong in this forest, but he couldn't explain what. When the rescue team arrived, John led them to the scene. They found the body and immediately began their investigation. However, all efforts to determine the cause of the woman's condition yielded no results. There were no clear signs to explain the horrifying situation. Meanwhile, John's mind was still spinning with the gruesome images, along with the mysterious growl that he couldn't shake. Unanswered questions flooded his thoughts, and the presence of an unidentified threat began to loom over the forest, adding to the suffocating atmosphere. Night fell, and the twinkling stars in the sky couldn't ease the worry in John's heart. He sat in his truck, gripping the steering wheel tightly, his eyes fixed on the darkness of the forest. The sounds of the late night, the rustling leaves, along with strange, eerie noises, echoed in his mind. With every passing minute, his anxiety grew. While the rescue team conducted their investigation, John decided to walk around the scene again, hoping to find some clue that could explain the horrific situation. He recalled every detail of the body he had seen, the torn fabric, the bloody hand, and the sheer terror frozen on the woman's face. John stepped into the dense wooded area surrounding the scene. With each step, he felt as if unseen eyes were watching him, but when he turned round, only the swaying leaves greeted him. Suddenly, a noise behind him startled him. He spun around, his heart pounding wildly, as if ready to burst from his chest. A large deer appeared, standing there with wide eyes, staring at John before quickly turning and disappearing into the darkness. He let out a sigh of relief, but the unease still lingered. He couldn't comprehend why a body would be left in such a remote forest, and what could have led to that situation. As he returned to the scene, John saw the rescue team collecting torn fabric and other evidence. They had called in additional investigators and forensic experts from the nearest city to assist. While waiting, John decided to explore an area he hadn't yet inspected. Among the thick foliage, he discovered a small cave. The dim light from his flashlight made the interior appear even more foreboding. A surge of adrenaline rushed through him, but his curiosity drew him closer. John crouched down, trying to get a better look inside the cave. Everything was silent, but on the ground was a peculiar marks. Something had been dragged out of the cave. As John bent down to inspect further, he suddenly spotted a necklace, its gemstones glimmering faintly in the light. He recognized it as a piece of jewelry often worn by women. That same chill returned, creeping up his spine. He knew this necklace might belong to the victim. John left the cave, carefully slipping the necklace into his pocket. realizing he might be holding a critical clue. When he returned to the rescue team, he saw them discussing the situation among themselves. John decided to tell them about the necklace he had just found. The lead investigator quickly approached, his expression serious. They asked John to lead them to where he had discovered the necklace. When they arrived, John pointed out the small cave, and several members of the team began to examine the inside. Everyone felt a sense of mounting tension. One of them, a seasoned woman with a weathered face, shook her head slightly, as if sensing something unsettling. "We need to be careful. There are too many unknowns here," the woman said. John nodded, but inside, his worries only grew about what might be waiting for them in the forest's shadows. The presence of that mysterious creature still haunted him. Could it be connected to the incident? Was it watching them right now? As the night grew darker, John felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the darkness was slowly consuming everything around him. The same thoughts replayed in his mind, along with the haunting image of the victim's terrified face, making it impossible for him to remain calm. The investigation continued, but the presence of the forest's mysteries seemed unending. John felt as though he was caught in the middle of a cruel game controlled by some unseen force. And he had no idea how to escape this unsettling situation. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the dense trees, but the atmosphere remained heavy. John woke up with a lingering sense of unease, as if something was waiting for him in the forest. He joined the rescue team and experts for a meeting, but his mind was still consumed by the image of the victim. The lead investigator, a tall man with a silver beard, headed the meeting. "We need to thoroughly investigate this woman and why she was out here," he said. "We'll review records of anyone who has entered the forest recently, and we need to analyze the necklace John found." The group nodded in agreement, and John felt a sense of responsibility to learn more about the victim. He wanted to uncover the truth, not just to protect others, but also to bring his own fears into the light. "It feels like we're being watched," one of the team members said, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I've been hearing strange noises since last night." John sympathized with his colleague. The growls he had heard still echoed in his ears, and the image of a mysterious creature lurking among the trees continued to send shivers down his spine. After the meeting, John decided to return alone to the spot where he had found the body. He equipped himself with a flashlight, a small knife, and a few essential items. As he entered the forest, the cool air refreshed him, but the lingering sense of dread remained. Walking deeper into the woods, it felt like he was stepping back into the scene of a haunting memory. John was ready to confront his fear, but that didn't stop the nervous tension from tightening his chest. Each step was calculated, and the eerie silence around him only heightened his anxiety. As he approached the original site, the beam of his flashlight illuminated the torn pieces of fabric. The scene was still there, untouched except for the absence of the rescue team. They had cleaned up the area, but the haunting memories remained vivid in John's mind. Suddenly, John heard a noise. It wasn't the growl this time, but the sound of footsteps on the ground. His heart pounded as he turned round. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and he felt as though everything around him was watching. Returning to the spot where the body had been found, John sat down and reflected on what had happened. He stared into the empty space in front of him, his thoughts swirling with mixed images, realizing that he wasn't just facing the evil outside, but also confronting the fear within himself. In that quiet moment, John recalled the stories his grandfather used to tell him about the mysteries of the forest. Strange creatures, wandering spirits seeking revenge. Those tales, once just legends, now felt like a haunting reality gnawing at him. After sitting for a while, John decided to stand up and leave the scene. He needed to return and dig deeper into who the woman was and what had happened to her. As he walked back, he couldn't shake the feeling that the forest's eyes were still following him. Once back in his truck, he called a friend who worked at the police department, asking for help in finding information about the victim. While waiting for the call back, he felt an urge to do more than just sit and wait. There might be signs or clues hidden within the forest, and John was determined not to let them slip past him again. When the phone rang, his friend's familiar voice came through. "We'll do everything we can to uncover the truth, but John, be careful. What you're dealing with might be more dangerous than you think." John's resolve only grew stronger after receiving information from his friend. He felt as though he had a responsibility to shed light on the case. On his way back from the forest, he couldn't stop thinking about the woman and what might have happened to her. Was she the victim of a cruel plot, or had she simply suffered an unfortunate accident? Throughout the drive home, the terrifying images still lingered in his mind. The growl he had heard remained an unsettling echo in his thoughts. John knew that finding clues was crucial, but he also felt a deep anxiety about returning to the forest. The horrifying memories had now become an ingrained part of his daily life. Once he got home, John decided to investigate the necklace he had found. After making a few calls, he located a small jewelry shop nearby that could help identify it. While waiting for a response, he devoted some time to researching the surrounding area in hopes of uncovering more information about the victim. Despite his efforts to focus, John's mind kept drifting back to the unsettling events. The forest, the unknown threat, and the eerie feeling of being watched haunted his every thought. He knew that this was more than just an investigation. It was a fight against the unknown forces that seemed to be lurking in the shadows, waiting for him to return. As time passed, John received news from the jewelry store. The necklace belonged to a woman named Megan, a young artist who lived in a nearby town close to the forest. According to the information the store provided, Megan had not returned home in several days, and her family was growing increasingly worried. Hearing this, John felt more responsible than ever. "We need to uncover the truth quickly," he thought to himself. He decided to contact Megan's family to see if they had any additional information. When speaking with Megan's mother on the phone, her voice was filled with worry and pain. She explained that Megan had gone to the forest to find inspiration for a new art piece. John could hear the sorrow in her voice, and his heart sank with the weight of her words. "We'll do everything we can to find her," John promised, even though he knew deep down that he was facing something far more daunting. After saying goodbye to Megan's mother, John made the decision to return to the forest. This time, he wasn't just looking for clues. He wanted to understand what had happened to Megan. He gathered his gear and prepared to enter the forest as night began to fall. The air outside was cool, but the tension building inside him made him break into a sweat. Determined, John ventured into the dark woods, knowing that the answers he sought were hidden somewhere in its shadows, along with whatever else awaited him. As John ventured deeper into the forest, he sensed that everything had changed. The light faded, and the darkness cloaked everything like a mysterious veil. Every small sound made him jump. He tried to stay calm, but fear seemed inevitable. Pushing through the dense brush, John suddenly noticed something glimmering in the beam of his flashlight. As he approached, he realized it was a camera. It could be Megan's, he thought. But a surge of dread washed over him as he considered the possibility that something terrible had happened to her. Just as he picked up the camera, a strange noise from behind startled him. That eerie feeling of being watched returned. John turned and saw a massive shadow standing in the darkness, its form unclear. His mind raced for an explanation, but only fear consumed him. As the shadow began to move closer, John realized he had no other option but to run. He turned and bolted toward the trail he had just come from, feeling the creature's breath close behind him. His heart pounded erratically, his legs kept moving. But the sound of the mysterious being still followed, relentless in its pursuit. The forest's darkness seemed to thicken, making John feel as though he was trapped in an unending nightmare. Branches whipped against his face and body, making it hard to focus, but survival instinct drove him forward, refusing to let him stop. Finally, reaching his truck, John threw himself inside and slammed the door shut. His heart pounded wildly, and he couldn't stop himself from glancing back outside. In that brief moment of silence, he realized he had escaped from something indescribable. It wasn't just a chase, it was a bone-chilling terror of whatever lurked outside, waiting for him. With shaking hands, John dialed the rescue team, his voice trembling as he reported finding the camera and the terrifying events that had unfolded. They promised to come immediately. When the rescue team arrived, John handed them the camera. Everyone looked at it with both skepticism and hope. "We need to examine this carefully. There might be photos of Megan on here," one of them said. John felt a mix of anxiety and hope swelling inside him. They needed to find Megan, no matter what had happened in the darkness of this forest. As the rescue team's flashlight illuminated the camera, John felt a wave of anticipation. They quickly decided to take the camera back for analysis, hoping to find photos that might provide clues about what had happened to Megan. While waiting for the results, John and the rescue team returned to the area where the body had been found. They conducted a more detailed survey, examining every corner, searching for any signs or traces they might have missed. "Everything's still the same," one of the team members said, their eyes filled with doubt. "We need to find another clue." John nodded. A deep, persistent feeling urged him to return to the spot where he had found the necklace. There might be more information hidden there, waiting to be uncovered. On the way back, John's thoughts drifted to Megan. She was an artist, but what could she have been doing in this forest? Searching for artistic inspiration, perhaps. But was there something else lurking, waiting for her? The question kept echoing in his mind, growing louder with every step he took. When John arrived at the spot, an eerie sensation washed over him. The sounds of the forest seemed to whisper, and the air felt thick and heavy. He stopped, carefully listening, but all he could hear were the rustling leaves and the distant calls of birds. Driven by determination, John began searching the area. He noticed faint tracks on the ground. It looked like multiple people had passed through recently. Scanning the surroundings, something shiny caught his eye. Approaching it, John realized it was a piece of fabric. It had the same pattern as the torn cloth found on Megan's body. The sight of it sent a chill down his spine. Someone had been here, possibly very recently. "I need to get out of here," he thought, his pulse quickening. Deciding to leave the area, John headed back toward the rescue team. As he reached his truck, the sense of something following him clung tightly, refusing to let him feel at ease. When John returned, the team was already preparing for their next meeting. They had managed to extract several photos from the camera John had found. The images were displayed on the screen, revealing moments captured in the forest. John couldn't help but feel a rush of anxiety as he looked at each one. In one photo, there was a young woman, likely Megan, standing by a stream, smiling. The picture radiated a sense of peace, but within John, the unease continued to build. What had happened after that moment? As they flipped through more photos, the team found another image of Megan standing in the dense forest, her expression troubled. John sensed a shift in her demeanor. She knew something was wrong, he thought. Suddenly, in another photo, something odd appeared. A large, shadowy figure lurked in the background, its shape unclear. "We need to analyze this photo closely," someone in the group said. Everyone stared intently at the screen, the tension in the room thickening as they tried to make sense of the mysterious figure hiding in the shadows. As the photo was zoomed in, the tension in the room became palpable. The shape resembled a massive creature, something that didn't belong in the forest. "This could be the same creature John heard," someone commented. John's heart raced. He couldn't shake the horror of imagining that Megan might have encountered this creature. What had kept her in the forest, unable to escape? "What do you all think about going back to the area where this photo was taken?" John suggested, knowing full well how dangerous it could be. The others exchanged glances, but no one objected. "We need to find Megan," one of the team members said, and everyone nodded in agreement. They decided to prepare for a trip back into the forest early the next morning. John felt a mix of excitement and dread stirring inside him. That night, he couldn't sleep. The image of Megan, along with the terror she must have faced, haunted his thoughts. He knew that the forest harbored not just evil, but also secrets that might never be unraveled. The next morning, it was still dark when John woke up. He prepared for the trip into the forest with a mix of anxiety and determination. The rest of the team was ready, each carrying the necessary equipment to ensure their safety on this dangerous mission. They decided to set off early to make the most of the daylight. When they arrived, the air was damp and cold, enveloping the forest in a heavy, eerie atmosphere. John led the group, feeling as if he were guiding an expedition into the depths of hell. The rustling leaves and distant bird calls felt like warnings. Every step was taken with caution, the tension hanging thick in the air like a taut wire ready to snap. After trekking a considerable distance, they neared the spot where the photo of Megan standing by the stream had been taken. John's heart raced, unsure of what they might discover. "We need to split up and search the area," he suggested, the weight of what might come next pressing heavily on him. The group agreed, and each person picked a different direction to explore. John chose to follow the stream, hoping it might lead him to more clues about Megan. As he walked along the water's edge, the silence of the forest enveloped him. There were no sounds, only the soft murmur of the flowing stream. Venturing deeper into the area, John suddenly heard a strange noise. His heart pounded, and he spun around, scanning the dense trees around him, but saw nothing but thick foliage. Probably just a wild animal, he reassured himself, though the persistent feeling of being watched gnawed at him. Suddenly, a scream pierced the silence from somewhere in the distance. Without hesitation, John bolted toward the sound. "Who's there?" he shouted, but no one responded. The further he ran, the more his anxiety mounted. His foot caught on a tree root, and he tumbled to the ground. As he stood up, the air felt wrong-heavy with an unshakable sense that something terrible had just happened. Near the source of the scream, John found one of the team members in a state of panic. "I saw something," the person shouted, eyes wide in terror, as if they had just experienced a nightmare come to life. "What was it?" John asked, trying to stay calm. "I don't know, it was huge, and it seemed like it was moving." The team member stammered, terror clear in their voice. A wave of fear hit John hard. "We need to get out of here, now," he said. But as they turned to leave, A deep growl rumbled from behind them. Before anyone could react, chaos erupted. The team scattered, panicked. John could feel the massive shadow closing in on them, as though it was chasing them down. The daylight was fading fast, and darkness began to swallow the forest whole. Everyone sprinted toward the trail, but in the confusion, they became separated. John had no idea where the others were, but one thing was certain: something was lurking right behind him. When he finally reached the edge of the forest, John let out a breath of relief. But the relief was short-lived, as he realized he had lost contact with the rest of the group. "Where is everyone?" he muttered to himself, anxiety flooding back as he stood alone at the forest's edge, unsure of the fate of his team. While searching for the group, John encountered another rescue worker standing in a clearing. "Where are they?" John asked urgently, but the worker just shook his head. "I don't know, but we need to find them right away." They decided against going back into the forest, opting instead to climb to a higher vantage point where they could get a clearer view of the area. John felt like he was trapped in a nightmare, his memories and fears swirling together in confusion. As they climbed a hill, John paused to take in his surroundings. The sight of the treetops and the distant sky brought a strange sense of familiarity, but it did nothing to ease his anxiety. The weight of uncertainty hung heavily over him as he scanned the horizon, knowing that something more terrifying than they could imagine was still out there, somewhere in the forest, and the rest of the team was missing. "Stay calm," John whispered to himself, but each passing moment felt like a test of his mental strength. "Megan needs us. We have to find her before it's too late." From the elevated point, John scanned the forest in every direction. In that brief moment, it dawned on him that somewhere deep in the woods, a secret was waiting to be uncovered. As darkness began to fall, John felt an overwhelming urge to push forward. "Megan, I will find you," he whispered, a promise he knew he couldn't abandon. It was a vow he clung to, the only thing driving him to continue this perilous search, no matter the danger that lurked ahead. As the sky darkened to black, John and the rescue worker found a temporary shelter. They sat beside a large fallen log, their flashlights casting faint beams into the thick darkness of sequoia forest. Everyone was tense, and the silence pressed down on them like a heavy weight. "We need to come up with a plan," John said, trying to maintain composure in the situation. "We can't stay here for long. We need to find a way to contact the outside rescue team and regroup." The rescue worker nodded, but his expression was still anxious. "I've been hearing strange noises ever since the sun started setting. Something doesn't feel right," he admitted. A surge of fear gripped John. He had heard growls in the forest before, and now, the presence of the mysterious creature seemed more real than ever. "We have to be careful," he replied. "We can't let ourselves get caught off guard." As the night deepened, the sounds of the forest grew louder. The rustling leaves and bizarre noises echoed through the woods, making it impossible for John to stay calm. Suddenly, a faint light flickered in the distance, barely visible through the thick shadows. Startled, John stood up, his heart racing. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "Someone's there," John whispered, his eyes tense as he stared in the direction of the light. But as it drew closer, they realized it was a flashlight beam. A woman from their group, Sarah, emerged, but she looked terrified and disoriented. "Where is everyone?" she cried, her face filled with worry. "We found temporary shelter," John replied. "We need to find the others right away." Sarah shook her head, panic etched on her face. "I couldn't find them. We need to go back." "Go back to where?" John asked, concern deepening. "We can't return to the forest. It's too dangerous. But Sarah seemed too shaken to listen, her voice trembling as she spoke. There's something out there, in the forest. I can feel it watching us. John could sense the urgency in her words. We need to find the others and get out of here right now. If we don't, we're running out of time. With Sarah's fear growing, John knew they had to act quickly. The forest, with its lurking dangers, was closing in on them, and their only hope was to regroup and escape before it was too late. They decided to start searching around, each holding a flashlight, moving cautiously with every step. The darkness engulfed them, and the sounds of the forest made it hard to focus. They were looking for any sign of the other team members, hoping to find them before it was too late. After walking a short distance, John suddenly heard a noise to the left. "Everyone, stop," he whispered urgently. A loud, rumbling sound echoed through the forest, as if something massive was moving nearby. John's heart pounded in his chest, and he couldn't stop the rising tide of fear. They all stood frozen, tense, waiting. "Is anyone there?" John called out, but there was no reply. Silence returned, but the strange noises continued to echo around them, as if the forest itself were alive with menace. "We need to go," Sarah cried, her voice trembling, and they quickly resumed moving. John could feel the fear spreading through the group, but he knew they had to stay calm. If they were going to survive whatever was stalking them, the forest's ominous presence weighed heavy on their minds, and time seemed to be slipping away. After some time searching, they reached a clearing in the forest, where the weak light of the moon filtered down. "They might be here," John said, his voice filled with hope. But as their flashlights scanned the surroundings, the silence felt unnervingly eerie. Suddenly, from behind them, a deep, powerful growl shattered the stillness. Everyone spun around, panic in their eyes. Emerging from the shadows, a massive figure loomed between the trees. "Run!" John shouted, and without hesitation, they sprinted towards the hill they had come from. The creature gave chase, its heavy footsteps pounding behind them. Cold sweat broke out on John's skin as the terror of the situation sank in. They ran, not daring to look back, only hearing the thunderous steps of the creature closing in. John's heart raced, feeling like it might burst from his chest. Everything around them became a blur of chaos, and the overwhelming fear took control of his mind as they fled through the dark forest. As they neared the edge of the forest, John suddenly stumbled, tripping over a large rock. In that moment, he realized there was no way out. Sarah and the others had run ahead, farther from sight. Despair flooded his chest. "Help me," he shouted, but no one heard. The creature was nearly upon him, its growls intensifying, stoking the terror inside him. John knew he couldn't give up. He had to get up and run. Summoning the last of his strength, he pushed himself to his feet. Suddenly, the beam of his flashlight illuminated the scene clearly. He turned, facing the creature that was closing in. Everything happened in an instant. It was enormous, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through his soul. "Megan," he screamed, but the name felt lost in the eerie silence of the forest. As the light shone brighter, John felt something strange. The creature didn't seem intent on attacking him, it just stood there, watching. His heart pounded as he began to realize that perhaps this creature wasn't hunting them. It was searching for something more than just them. As the beam from John's flashlight illuminated the creature, a strange feeling washed over him. This wasn't a ferocious beast, but something far more mysterious and ancient than anything he had ever seen. Its massive muscles rippled beneath its dark, bark-like skin, which looked almost like decaying wood. Its glowing eyes shone brightly, like two gems gleaming in the night. John couldn't tear his gaze away, feeling as though he was hypnotized by the creature. It stood there, motionless, not attacking, only observing. His heart raced, caught between the overwhelming fear and a sense of curiosity. "Megan," he called out again, but once more there was no response. The creature remained still, and its inaction made John even more uneasy. Suddenly, the images of the photos they had seen earlier flooded his mind, the one of Megan by the stream. Her expression troubled. Had she encountered this creature? The thought haunted him, clinging to his mind like a persistent specter that refused to leave. Was this the same being that had been watching Megan, just as it was watching him now, and what did it want? John's thoughts spiraled with questions, each more unsettling than the last. Mastering his fear, John cautiously stepped closer to the creature. "We don't want to harm you," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the cold air, swallowed by the forest. "We're just looking for a friend, Megan." The creature didn't react immediately. Instead, it slowly lowered its head, as if it was listening to every word John spoke. A glimmer of hope flickered in John's heart, but the lurking danger remained ever present. "Megan," John called out, louder this time. In response, the creature let out a deep, resonating growl that echoed through the trees. It felt like an answer, but John couldn't tell if it was a sign of warning or acknowledgement. Suddenly, from the shadows, a faint voice broke the tension. "John," it was Sarah's voice, weak but unmistakable. Relief surged through John as he saw her emerge from behind the trees. "Sarah, where have you been?" John hurriedly asked, but his attention quickly shifted back to the massive creature, which had now turned its gaze toward Sarah. Fear gripped John again. The creature's focus was no longer on him, it was on her. "Stop," John shouted, but Sarah didn't hear him. She was moving closer, the beam of her flashlight casting light across her worried face. "There's something here, John. We have to leave," she said, but her gaze was locked on the creature, unable to look away. "Megan," John yelled, feeling like everything was slipping away, as if time itself had frozen. The creature began moving toward them, but John couldn't let it harm Sarah. He raised his flashlight, its light reflecting off the creature's face. Strangely, it showed no signs of aggression, only a calm, calculated movement. "Megan," John shouted again, his anxiety bubbling over. "If you're alive, show yourself." His voice echoed into the darkness, and for a moment, everything went silent. The forest, the creature, and even the rustling wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting for an answer. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the forest, a woman with blonde hair. It was Megan. John's heart skipped a beat. "Megan," he called out, rushing toward her. But Megan stopped in her tracks, her eyes wide with fear. "Megan, why are you here?" John asked as he reached her. "I don't know, John. I got lost, and there's something in the forest," she replied, her voice trembling with panic. At that moment, the creature moved closer. Megan spotted it and screamed, "Oh my God, what is that?" "Megan, no," John yelled, pulling her close. "Don't be afraid. It hasn't harmed us." Megan stared at the creature, and something in her gaze startled John. It was as if she recognized it. "I've seen it before," she said, her breath rapid. "It's not an enemy." They all stood still, and the creature halted as well, its glowing eyes fixed on them. John could feel it too, an invisible connection between them and the creature. It wasn't hostility. It was something else, something far deeper. "Megan, can you explain?" John asked, though the air around them felt heavier by the second. "I don't know why, but there's something about this forest that makes me feel at peace, like I can communicate with it," Megan said, her eyes still locked on the creature. Maybe it's protecting us. Protecting us? John asked, surprise written all over his face. But why us? Suddenly, the creature lowered its head, almost as if agreeing with Megan's words. A strange sense of harmony filled the air. It wasn't just a wild creature. It felt like a guardian of the forest, a force intertwined with its very essence. Megan, if it doesn't mean us harm, we should find a way out of here, John suggested. We need to leave before dawn. Megan nodded, her connection to the creature still strong. John, now realizing they weren't in immediate danger, felt an odd calmness replace the fear. Whatever the creature's intentions were, it had given them a chance to escape. Megan nodded, and as they turned to head back, the creature remained still, its glowing eyes watching their every move. John felt as though he had stepped into a strange dream, both terrifying and full of mystery. They began walking slowly, following the path Megan had taken earlier. John's mind raced with thoughts of what had just transpired. The forest wasn't just a place of danger. It was a keeper of secrets they had barely scratched the surface of. With each step, the beam of the flashlight grew dimmer, but for some reason, John didn't feel the same fear. There was something different in the air now, a strange sense of peace, as though the creature was silently guiding them. It became clear that they weren't alone in this vast forest anymore. The presence of the creature, watching over them, had turned the ominous wilderness into something almost protective. They kept moving, knowing they were being led, not by fear, but by an unseen connection with the ancient forest. As John, Megan, and Sarah continued forward, the atmosphere grew quieter. The strange noises from the forest had vanished, leaving only the sound of their footsteps echoing through the trees. It felt as if the mysterious creature was still nearby, guiding them through the tangled forest paths. Megan, are you sure this is the same path you took earlier? John asked, feeling a growing sense of anticipation. He didn't want to get lost in the vast wilderness again. I recognize some landmarks, but I'm not entirely sure, Megan admitted, uncertainty in her voice. Everything in the forest looks a little different at night. They passed beneath towering trees, the fallen leaves crunching softly underfoot. John scanned the surroundings for familiar signs, but the darkness made it difficult to navigate. Suddenly, the beam from his flashlight flickered, and he realized they were approaching a clearing, one that he had discovered earlier in the morning. The sight of the clearing stirred something inside him. It felt like they were on the verge of uncovering something significant. Megan stopped beside him, her breath catching. John, I think we're close, she whispered, her voice filled with both fear and hope. When they reached the center, the sight before them made all three of them freeze. In the middle of the clearing was a large stone circle, formed from ancient, towering stones. The stones seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, exuding a mystical aura. What is this? John asked, his voice filled with growing excitement and unease. A sacred circle, Megan whispered, her eyes wide. I've read about it in a book. The ancients believed these circles were places to connect with the creatures of the forest. John felt his pulse quicken as they stood before the mysterious sight. The creature that had guided them seemed tied to this place, and the feeling of something far greater than themselves loomed in the air. They weren't just exploring the forest anymore, they were stepping into its deepest, most hidden secrets. John felt an undeniable pull from the stone circle. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch one of the cool stones. Suddenly, a jolt of energy surged through his body, as if some ancient force was awakening inside him. Megan, how do you feel? He asked, noticing her standing nearby, drawn to the circle as well. I feel like something is calling to me, Megan replied, her eyes wide and glowing with curiosity. It's like it wants our attention. Sarah stood a little further back, clearly uneasy. We should be careful. There might be something dangerous here. No matter what happens, we need to investigate, John said, unable to resist the growing curiosity. If this circle is truly a place of connection, maybe we'll uncover what's really happening in this forest. Together, they decided to step into the circle. As they crossed over the ancient stones, the moonlight seemed to dim and a strange, almost mystical atmosphere wrapped around them. All three of them could feel an intense energy radiating from beneath the ground, as though the circle itself was coming to life. The air grew thick with power, and John knew they were no longer just exploring. They had activated something deep and ancient within the forest. Suddenly, the large creature reappeared, standing at the edge of the circle. It didn't seem hostile, in fact. It looked as though it was waiting for something. Its glowing eyes shimmered with a quiet intensity, almost like it was praying for a connection. "Megan, maybe you should try speaking to it," John suggested. "It might have something it wants to communicate." Megan took a deep breath, stepped closer to the creature, and spoke softly. "We've come here to understand. If you can help us, please show us the way." The creature bowed its head, and its glowing eyes softened, as if it understood her words. Suddenly, a warm sound filled the air, like a distant melody, enveloping them all in a sense of peace. The strange song seemed to resonate from the forest itself, calming their fears and making them feel as though they were part of something far larger and more ancient than they had imagined. The connection they had been seeking was happening not just between them and the creature, but with the forest and the secrets it held. "Do you hear that?" John said, a sense of wonder spreading through him. "It's communicating with us." The voice didn't seem to come from any one of them, but echoed within their minds. "You have come here to uncover the secrets of this forest. Do not fear, for this place holds power and protection." "A power," Sarah whispered, still uneasy. "We need to get out of here before sunrise." "The sun will not rise unless you find the connection," the voice responded, a calm yet firm statement. "You must discover the missing piece to free the spirits trapped within the forest." John looked around, feeling a strange force pulling at him. "Spirits?" he asked, his curiosity growing. "The souls of those lost long ago. They are waiting for release," the voice continued. "This circle is the only place where they can find the light." Megan turned to John, her eyes filled with determination. "We can't leave without doing something. We have to help them." John felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just about survival anymore. There was a deeper purpose to their presence in the forest. They had stumbled upon something far greater than themselves, and now they had a chance to unlock its mystery and bring peace to those who had been forgotten. "Exactly," John said, a newfound determination rising within him. "We need to find this missing piece." They decided to stay within the circle, drawing strength from its energy, waiting for a sign from the forest. A profound sense of peace enveloped them, as if they were becoming one with the ancient woods surrounding them. "We'll figure out what's happening here," John said, confidence returning to his voice. "We'll help these spirits find their peace." As they stood there, the atmosphere suddenly shifted. A strong gust of wind swept through, carrying with it whispers and prayers from the trees. The moonlight shone brightly on the stone circle, casting an ethereal glow around them. In that moment, they knew their journey had only just begun. The forest, with all its mysteries and secrets, was calling to them, asking them to unlock the truth, not just for themselves, but for the souls long lost to the shadows. The path ahead was uncertain, but John, Megan, and Sarah were ready to face whatever lay ahead. determined to find the missing piece and bring light to the darkness. As John, Megan, and Sarah stood within the circle, it felt as if time had stopped. The space around them became eerily still, and they could sense the presence of the lost souls in the forest, waiting for release. No longer were they simply lost in the woods. They were now part of a greater journey, a mission to bring peace to those wandering spirits. Megan, do you remember anything about how to resolve this circle? John asked, a glimmer of anticipation in his eyes. I read that circles like these might require a kind of ritual to connect with the spirits. Megan responded, her voice filled with a flicker of hope. We may need to figure out how to do that. Sarah, though still a bit anxious, remained steadfast beside her friends. Maybe we need to place certain stones in the circle or speak some words. Let's try, John said, the determination in his heart growing stronger. These stones must hold some significance. They began examining each stone in the circle, looking for symbols or markings that could lead them to the answer. John touched a large stone at the center and felt a powerful surge of energy run through him. As his hand rested on the cool surface, an image suddenly flashed in his mind. It was a vision of the forest long ago, vibrant and full of life. Figures, ancient and wise, moved within the circle, performing a ceremony that seemed to connect the earth and sky, bringing balance to the forest. John gasped, pulling his hand back as the vision faded. I saw something, John said breathlessly. It was a ritual, something that used to happen here. Megan and Sarah looked at him intently, realizing that the stones held more than just power. They carried the memory of the forest's past and the key to unlocking its future. The vision in John's mind showed a forest bathed in light, where mystical creatures lived in harmony with nature. But it also revealed a darker place, where lost souls wandered, unable to find peace due to the pain of their past. Megan, I saw something, John said, shivering from the intensity of the vision. It's possible these souls are trapped here because of something that happened long ago. Megan nodded, her eyes wide with realization. I feel like we need to uncover the history of this forest. We have to understand what happened to help them move on. Maybe we'll find clues in the markings, Sarah suggested. Let's search around. They began to explore the areas surrounding the stone circle, hoping to find any signs that could give them insight into the forest's forgotten past. As they carefully examined the stones, John suddenly noticed something etched into a set of nearby rocks, ancient carvings, faded but still visible. These are old, John whispered, running his fingers over the markings. The carvings depicted scenes of people gathering in the circle, performing rituals, and communicating with mysterious beings. But there was also a depiction of a great tragedy or disaster that seemed to shatter the balance, leaving the forest's souls trapped in an eternal state of unrest. This could be it, John said, his voice low with awe. This is what we need to understand. Megan and Sarah stepped closer, examining the carvings with him. The images told a story of the forest's ancient inhabitants, their connection to the land, and a terrible event that bound the souls to this place. It was clear now they needed to find a way to complete the ritual and restore the balance that had been broken long ago. Megan, look at this, John called, pointing to the carvings. It looks like a depiction of some sort of ritual. Megan stepped closer and examined the drawings. This shows people standing in the circle, as if they're praying for the souls, she said, her eyes lighting up as she studied the images. Maybe we need to reenact this ritual. We need to figure out exactly what to do, John said, feeling as though everything was starting to make sense. They carefully analyzed the carvings, trying to piece together the steps of the ritual. One image showed people holding branches while chanting a name in the circle. "Megan, do you think that's the name of the spirits?" John asked, pointing to the image. "Maybe calling their names is how we free them." Megan nodded. That could be it. They need to be remembered, their names spoken, to finally be set free. Determined, they decided to follow the guidance in the carvings. John picked up a branch from the ground, and together with Megan and Sarah, they stepped into the circle. They stood in their places, feeling the weight of the ritual before them. The air around them thickened with energy as they prepared to call out the names of the forgotten souls, hoping to restore peace to the forest and release the spirits that had been trapped for so long. "Let's call out the names of the souls," John said, and began reciting the names they believed belonged to the lost ones of the forest. "For the souls who have not found peace, hear our call," Megan said, her voice carrying through the still night air. "We are here to help you," Sarah added, her voice trembling with both excitement and determination. "Show us what you need." They closed their eyes, and a warm sensation filled the air around them. A brilliant, mystical light began to radiate from the stone circle, glowing with a soft, ethereal hue. Slowly, shadowy figures started to materialize around them, spirits from the past, their eyes shimmering with hope. "Thank you," a voice whispered, as gentle as the breeze. "We have been waiting for help for so long." "What happened here wasn't your fault," John said, his voice thick with emotion. "We will help you find peace." The spirits hovered around them, their presence calm yet filled with relief. The forest itself seemed to exhale, as if the burden it had carried for so long was finally beginning to lift. The light from the circle pulsed with life, and John, Megan, and Sarah knew they had taken the first step toward freeing the souls trapped in this forest. As they stood within the circle, it felt as though everything around them was coming alive. The light grew brighter, as if the forest itself could sense the connection. The spirits became clearer, their forms no longer shadows, but figures with stories etched in the air, flowing into the minds of John, Megan, and Sarah. "A great loss befell us. We have been trapped in our pain and fear," one spirit said, its voice heavy with sorrow. "We need to be freed from this imprisonment. We'll do whatever we can to help you," John vowed, feeling a surge of strength rising within him. "Just tell us what we need to do." A radiant light burst forth from the circle, growing in intensity as all the spirits spoke in unison. "Light the way for what was lost. Give us the peace we deserve." Suddenly, the ghostly figures began to whirl around the circle, creating a mystical vortex of light. John could feel the powerful connection between them and the spirits, a deep bond that transcended time and space, as if they were becoming one with each other. The light grew even brighter, illuminating the forest around them. The weight of the forest's past, the sorrow of the trapped souls, seemed to lift as the brilliant light filled every corner of the space. It was not just a light of guidance, but a beacon of hope and release. The spirits, once lost, were on the verge of finding their peace. "Megan, Sarah, hold on tight," John shouted, and the three of them grasped each other's hands, feeling the surge of energy flow through them. They could sense the air changing around them, as if the souls were finally breaking free from the chains of the past. The cries of fear and anguish slowly faded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace, as if the darkness had lifted and they had overcome every obstacle. "Thank you," a voice echoed, and John knew the spirits were now free. "We will live on in your memories." The brilliant lights began to dim, and John, Megan, and Sarah opened their eyes. The stone circle glowed brighter than ever, but the shadowy figures were gone, leaving only a feeling of tranquility in their place. "We did it," Sarah exclaimed, excitement flooding her voice. The weight of the past had lifted, and the forest around them felt lighter, as if it too had been healed. They stood in the glowing circle, realizing they had not only freed the spirits, but had become part of something much larger than themselves. Connection to the forest, its history, and the souls who once lived there. "Yes, we've helped them," John said, a wave of relief washing over him. Now they've found their peace. As they stepped out of the circle, the forest around them seemed different. The cheerful sound of birds singing echoed from afar, like a new song for life itself. They knew they were no longer lost souls wandering through the woods. "Megan, you did great," John said, looking into her bright eyes. "We've overcome everything together." "Thank you both for not giving up," Megan replied softly. "We've created something powerful. Now we just need to find our way back," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "I don't want to stay here any longer." They decided to follow the path they had taken, feeling a sense of peace guiding them. The sunlight began to break through the canopy of trees, casting warm beams across the forest floor, bringing a feeling of comfort and renewal as they made their way home. The darkness was gone, replaced by the light of a new beginning. "This is a place we'll return to someday," John said, a smile spreading across his face. "This forest has given us a valuable lesson." As they stepped out of the forest, a gentle feeling of peace filled their hearts. They had not only freed the lost souls, but also found a deeper connection to themselves and to nature. The sequoia forest had become a part of their lives, and they would forever remember this journey. The weight of the past had lifted, and they left the forest knowing they had been changed by the experience. What once felt like a place of mystery and fear was now a source of wisdom and strength. And in their hearts, they knew they would carry the forest's spirit with them, wherever life would take them next.